Welcome to Point Loma Podcast. My name is R.O. This is Pastor Karla. We are going through as you know, I'm guessing, because you're now 8 episodes in, you probably know we're going through the book of Revelation. This is from Pastor Karla's Bible study with our women back in 2023, and we decided, let's share it with everybody else too. And so we are now on episode 8. Last week we got done with the letters, and now we're entering into the throne room. And
throne room.
This one's might be a little longer. We're not sure if we're going to do 2 episodes or just do 1 and then split it up. We're not sure, but just hang with us and go with us as we
And the reason why this episode might be a little bit longer is because chapters 4 and 5 in the book of Revelation are really the center importance to understanding the rest of the book.
So they kind of have to go together. It's hard to do one and then the other, but if we have to split it up, we'll just know that. So
just a reminder, we're not going to review everything. There's too much information, so you need to go back and listen to our other podcasts if you haven't already. But Revelation is a letter. It's a letter that's apocalyptic literature and prophetic. And so Revelation speaks, if you remember, pastoral.
There you go.
Against the ordinary empire. That's the context, which are the everyday evils, injustices, and misguided allegiances that are daily with us. So followers of Christ back in this time period and today have to choose between whether Jesus is Lord or, in their case, Caesar is Lord. And this affected every aspect of their lives. So as a result, John, the writer of this letter, or this book, did not write Revelation to manufacture a crisis for people who are complacent about empire. This is the words of, what's this guy? Michael Gorman. But complacency about Rome was the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So the last 3 episodes, we've been looking at the letters written to specific churches representing all churches about their complacency, really about how to resist assimilating to the empire. And so when we ended the letters last week, if you recall, Jesus was knocking on the door of the church of Laodicea. And they were too self-sufficient to even know that he was not with them, even in worship. They were worshiping their own self-sufficiency, and Jesus wasn't even there. That may seem random because today there's going to be a shift in our text, but there is a connection because we open up chapter 4 after these letters have been written, and it says this: "After this I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open."
I know, you just told me that, and I just was like, that blew my. I was like, what? That's
so
crazy.
we had a closed door in Laodicea, and all of a sudden there's an open door.
You mean it all connects? That's weird.
All connects. So this is a shift away today from the easy and understandable letters to now we're entering into apocalyptic literature, but the whole text is still connected, and you can see that through that open door. So a closed door versus an open door. So let's start out with that. Okay. The worship we see with our eyes, which is happening in Laodicea, where there's a closed door and Jesus isn't even present, versus an open door where true worship is taking place. And so chapters 4 and 5 are the first of 7 worship scenes that we are going to see throughout the book of Revelation. And they set the stage, really, as I said, for the interpretation of the rest of this book. 7 scenes.
Okay.
We know the number 7.
Okay. Yep, right. Completion.
Okay.
Wholeness.
So basically chapters 4 and 5, if you were to imagine them, are like 2 sides of a panel painting that that hinge on one another. So chapter 4, we get a picture of the throne room of God, which we're going to look at right now. And then chapter 5, we get a picture of that throne room reimagined through Christ. And at the end of chapter 5, these 2 scenes are brought together. The throne room scene has its understanding, this idea of a throne room scene in Old Testament prophecy. This is not the first time we've seen a throne room scene in the scriptures. We've seen one in Isaiah. We've seen one in Daniel.
Ezekiel.
We have a lot of, in the the prophets, we have a lot of throne room scenes. But it's not just Old Testament prophecy that it's rooted in. The throne room scene is also very common image in the Roman Empire.
Right. Hello.
Okay.
Right.
So John in this vision in chapter 4 gets a glimpse into heaven, a vision of worship that also becomes a call to worship for the church with a capital C. There's this, and we discover that there's this kind of this beehive of activity happening around the throne. So why don't we read a little bit of it? We don't really need all of it, but let's
I'll read and you tell me stop.
Yeah, maybe start with come up here in verse, what is that, 1?
At the end of the verse, speaking like a trumpet said, "Come up here and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne with one seated on the throne. and the one seated there looks like jasper and carnelian.
Okay, let's pause there for a second.
Dude, that's...
At once I was in the spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne with one seated on the throne. We are not told who the one is yet. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, that's definitely towards the Roman Empire. I mean, that's the image that they're trying to convey. And
correct.
And so they haven't told us yet because
if you're hearing this, you're like, oh, this is just an image from the Roman Empire.
Right. This is where the propaganda.
This is where the king sits. We don't know who it is yet. It's not declared as God. Okay.
Right.
But let's
this is
talk.
Where Caesar sits. Right?
Yes, this is where Caesar sits. So let's talk about the one seated. Keep reading. Verse 3.
Verse 3, and the one there seated there looks like jasper and carnelian, and around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. Around the throne are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 elders, dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. Coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder, and in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches, which are the 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne there is something like a sea of glass, like crystal. Around the throne and on each side of the throne are 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and behind. The first living creature like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature with a face of a human, like a human face, and the fourth living creature like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and inside.
Okay, we can probably stop there. We're just getting the idea that there's a lot going on here. Yeah. There's a lot going on around this throne. And so Eugene Peterson, in his book, which we've also been using, called Reversed Thunder, which is really interesting, writes this about this scene. Worship is a meeting at the center so that our lives are centered in God and not lived eccentrically. We worship so that we live in response to and from this center, the living God. So failure to worship consigns us to a life of spasms and jerks at the mercy of every advertisement, every seduction, every siren. Without worship, we are manipulated and manipulating. We are frightened or panicked. That worship is a key component, an essential component, I guess, of our lives in Christ. So hold on to that. I think that's why there's a worship scene. So as a reminder, as we're looking at this chaos of this worship scene, the king in this time period, we're not sure who it was. It was either Nero or it was Domitian, depending on when this was written. We don't know. Theologians disagree. The only really there are distinguishing differences between Nero and Domitian. Nero, what do you know about him?
Wasn't he the destruction of the temple? Wasn't he the one that took it down?
Yeah, he was he was like the massive persecutor of Christians in particular. If you remember, he burned them alive on lampstands and stuff like that.
Dude, all those emperors, like the way they killed people is it all bleeds together, but yes.
Totally. So Nero, in order to divert attention, I guess, started blaming Christians for everything. And so persecution broke out and then ended with the destruction of the temple. So Domitian was later on, and he switched things up a bit. He wasn't just annihilating to Christians. He was just a madman and annihilating to everybody. So he was kind of a tyrant. They were both horrible terrors, and both of their positions placed them as Lord and God. But they were different types of terrors. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so Roman imperial courts, when gathered around a throne. A throne. What does that symbolize?
The ultimate authority, the top dog, the ultimate judge.
I think of that movie Lord of the Rings, when there's scenes when you walk in and there's always some dude sitting on a throne, and you're like, oh, that's the person of power and authority. So that's very typical in Roman imperial courts. And in Roman imperial courts, there were always attendants also surrounding the throne, and hymns and acclamations were constantly being given. The lesser attendants would lower themselves and lay down crowns. And so you see that what you just read depicts a very similar scene.
Right.
Roman imperial courts.
You knew who had the ultimate authority in that room.
Right.
Right. And so,
But the activity happening here would not have been unusual.
Right. It's just, that's a courtroom. That's a decision-making room.
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
The Old Testament prophecy, as we mentioned, also had similar scenes like this, and they borrowed imagery. So this is also borrowed imagery from Isaiah and Daniel. What does the one seated on this throne look like? We know that he has not been named yet. There's nobody been named. What is this person look like? The one seated there.
He looks like Jasper and carnelian.
Yeah, so what does that mean?
I don't know. I'm just thinking like fine, like Jasper and carnelian. And those are colors, or what is that? Colors, or are those like special like stones, jewels? I don't know.
Stones,
I'm just like
jewels?
I'm thinking like ultimate riches and ultimate beauty and just brightness, sparkling.
Yes,
There's a
beauty.
rainbow, like an emerald. You know,
Yes,
it's
like
just
beauty and light. So this is a picture of gems sparkling, when
it's
light.
just like the happy place with
Right?
unicorns everywhere.
Totally. That light is bathing everyone that surrounds this throne. It is not like the
I know.
Lord of the Rings
Yes.
scenes when you walk in and it's like a dark
Oh, right.
in the throne and the miserable guy. No, there is light and it's beautiful and bright. And the throne is located, if you see, in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see that there are some people there, 24 elders
Mhm.
dressed in white robes. I think you have an interesting theory about who
Well,
these.
I was doing some study on that, and the 24 hours, and you and I would probably agree that most of the interpretations are 24, and they represent the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 disciples and whatever. But I read one interpreter said it could refer to the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, and I was like, we think there's 39, but in the Hebrew Bible they don't use First and Second Chronicles. They match them all up into Chronicles, and they take the 12 minor prophets and they put them all together as one book. And I was like, that is fascinating. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was an interesting interpretation. I don't know which one's correct, but I thought that was real. I was like, wow, interesting.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of the more accepted interpretation of the 12 tribes and the 12 apostles.
Disciples.
Just like,
it combines.
Because it's like a completion.
Yes, right.
So whatever it is.
But to the Jewish people, that it would be the completion of their scripture.
That's true.
So it's completion.
True.
Ultimately, it's
completion.
It's completion regardless. Which is interesting.
So what we know is we have wholeness or completion around this throne. And the people are wearing white, meaning they are purified, and they're all wearing crowns, which means there's a symbol of authority happening here. But as a lesser authority, we see in verse 10 that they lay down their crowns. Okay. So activity, we've got completion. We've got bright lights. In verse 6, we see a sea of glass. Is that what it says? And in front of the
crystal.
throne,
a sea of glass like crystal.
Crystal. And I had read some theologians that saw this as like water, like our entrance into baptism. That there's a cleansing at the bottom of the throne.
Okay.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
And this makes sense to me. We see cleansing all throughout the Bible.
Totally.
I mean, ceremonially, we see it in temple worship. We see the crossing of the Red Sea.
Yep.
There's a passing through water to get to holiness. Bright lights, everyone's happy.
Celebration.
Yeah, the completion. This is worship. The completion of the old and the new coming together.
All of humanity.
Through baptism. Yep.
Right.
All of humanity. And then we've got in verse 6 through 8, we've got these creatures. Who were they?
They're the 4 living creatures, the full of eyes in front and behind. They have eyes all over, which is amazing. They can see everything. I don't know. I don't know. I just, when they have eyes all over, it's like they can see everything. I don't know. They have.
I think there's a symbol. They're fully awake.
Right. Yes. Okay.
Every part of their being is fully awake.
Yep.
Think about that church that we read a couple podcasts ago that was dead asleep.
Right. Like they looked alive.
They looked alive, but they're not alive.
They were the valley of dry bones, right?
But the creation here is fully
awake and alive to the presence.
Yeah. Yep. These 4 creatures. We've got the ox, the lion, the human, and the eagle.
That's from Ezekiel 1, actually.
Yeah. We also see this in Daniel.
Okay.
We see this also in Daniel. And so what this represents is the animal kingdom. It's chaotic, but it's also representative. All creation is gathered together around the throne. The spiritual, the natural world, everyone's fully awake. We have some birds flying around. Who they are is less important, I think, in this passage, because it's not literal than what they are doing.
Right.
What are they doing?
They're worshiping.
They're worshiping.
They're saying, "You are holy, 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 Lord God Almighty."
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're singing in one voice.
One voice. You are worthy as Lord. Yep.
You are worthy. You are worthy to receive power and glory. Holy, holy, holy. Why do you think singing, as a worship leader yourself, why do you think singing is such an important part of worship?
Well, I mean, it's unifying. Everybody can, even if they don't sing well, everybody sings. There's something they have songs in their heart. You kind of catch yourself driving and you're, whatever. You kind of will catch yourself singing. I think there's a unification to it. There's not only a unification that we're all singing together, but there's like we're all focusing on one message, whatever that message of the song is, we're singing it together. You know, I went to, this was before, when Mindy and I were dating, we went to a Backstreet Boys concert.
Oh,
yeah, right. Back in the day, what up, what's up? And I remembered, I was so struck that there was these like 3 like 12-year-old girls, and like, you know, they were like singing their heart out. Like they were just I was like, that is worship. They are getting after it, singing to the Backstreet Boys. They're like singing with them, and they're like, yeah, you know, and they were like getting into it. And I was like, it was really cool. But, you know, you think of concerts are like kind of like worship service. Everybody's singing together, and U2's really good about this, you know, about getting people to, you know, sing together. But there's like this sense of coming together, this unified message. And we're all like, I don't know, rich, poor, black, white, we're all different, but we come from different stories, but we're together on this.
And there's as you said, there's a message that's external to you.
Right.
It places something external.
And we all are agreeing with it.
Yes.
In this moment.
So that's not a surprise that around this throne room scene, there is emotional, all the senses are involved.
Yeah.
There's singing. This is an experience. This is an experience.
Right.
There's one who sits on the throne, and it's an experience. And then we shift. So chapter 5, the scene shifts. So now we see a scroll. Verse 1 of chapter 5. Then I saw on the right hand of the one seated on the throne, hasn't been named yet, by the way, of the one seated on the throne, a scroll written on the inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice in the midst of this worship service, who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And so you see that the author, or John, begins to weep in verse 4 bitterly because no one was around or was able to open the scroll. And then one of the elders said, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And then I saw between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders a lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered. Okay, we're just going to stop right there. So
come on.
The scene shifts. Now we have this scroll.
Right.
And it's written on both sides, front and back, which, by the way, is not normal.
Right.
That is unusual.
Yeah, normally it's on one side, where you can't see it. Right.
So already as a hearer of this, or a hearer, because you're hearing this text, that would be like, that's different. This cannot be a normal.
And what's on the outside?
Right.
And I, when you see what's on the outside, it's like you can read partially what the message is. So there's like something partial.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I can read partial. I want to know what's more.
So
what's the whole thing
what
say?
that speaks to us is partially this has been revealed.
Yes.
We go back to that Daniel thing.
Whoa.
So its content has only partially been revealed.
Right.
And on it there are 7 seals instead of 1. Which was also different. So this denotes importance.
Right.
Once again, our fullness. Scrolls would have been, by the way, really old-fashioned at this point. So we were already up to codexes at this point.
Oh, okay. I was like, really? Okay.
So early books. So we know by the scene that this scroll is ancient.
Right.
And we also know, because we've already talked about this in this podcast, that this connects back to Daniel chapter 12. This scroll is that ancient scroll that has been sealed, and we see it partially revealed.
Right.
But he replied back then, "Go away, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end." And here we are.
And here we are.
But there's a problem. No one can open it. What is it?
What's in there? I can see partially what's written up.
What's in there? What is in there?
Like all the, I'm guessing everything like you want to know about life, like all of life is revealed.
What is in there?
I don't know. What is it? You tell me.
It's most likely.
I'm guessing. I can only see part of it.
We can receive from the text. It's most likely the plan of God to judge and save the world, because that's what happens next. These churches are also saying,
will ultimately come into fruition.
Yeah, they're also saying, here we are being oppressed. We are being persecuted. We are having a hard time. God, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
So that's what's most likely in the scroll. And so why do you think John is so emotional? In verse 4, he begins to weep bitterly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll.
Well, if you're weeping bitterly, there's a sense of like what you had hoped for isn't going to happen. Like when I was thinking like, because when Jesus died, then some of the, then they go, didn't it say Peter went and he wept bitterly,
Yeah.
or when he got called out for the cocking the rooster crowing or whatever, that story. I'm like, he went and wept bitterly because there was a sense of like he had failed, or there was everything you had hoped for isn't going to come to fruition.
Yes.
Like it is like ultimate like hopelessness and sadness, and this thing that you held on to.
Yeah, so
Gone.
here's John. You got to remember, he's on the island of Patmos. He's
Right.
receiving this vision. He's just gotten these letters to these churches, which are filled with ways that they are suffering and struggling and assimilating and all these things. And then he sees this beautiful throne room scene of worship with this amazing light.
Right.
Remember the
Right.
unicorns? And then he's like, so overcome.
I don't think there were unicorns in the Bible. Maybe there were. I'm not sure. But
Right. So he sees the contrast between this
Right.
life and the next.
Right. And he's just like,
I want this.
Let's get there.
This is where and no one's here to open the scroll to tell us how this is going to happen.
There's no way to open that door to get there.
Correct. And so he's overcome. And so here's the shock factor. You ready?
Okay.
Here's what nobody would expect. It's a reversal.
Is it
he says,
where is it?
The one to open the scroll. This is the most important thing up till now.
Yeah.
And I begin to, then one of the elders said to me in verse 5, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. Then I saw between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders a lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent out into all the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of the one who had seated on the throne. And when he'd taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures, they all bowed down, they sang prayers, they sang a song. So here's the shock factor. Look, see, a lion from the tribe of Judah. But when John turns on the throne, when John turns, there is not a lion.
Well, this is what, so it's what he heard, look and see. And then when he turns, when he actually goes to see, what he saw,
he saw a slaughtered lamb. Look, a lion.
Right.
And then he turns and he sees a slaughtered lamb. This is so important. If our hearers hear nothing else, this is the central mystery of the apocalypse. God overcomes the world, not through a show of force, but through the suffering and death of Jesus. Through the faithful witness, through the martyr. Look, it's a lion. But then he turns and looks, and it's a slaughtered lamb. That is shocking.
Totally.
That is shocking because what is that? Because what that speaks to us is that this slaughtered lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes. These 7 eyes, the slaughtered lamb has perfect perception.
Right.
This slaughtered lamb has perfect power. And this slaughtered lamb shares in royal dominion on the throne with God. And so worship now shifts at this point. But in Revelation, power then is being redefined.
Yep.
How, I guess? Where is the power?
The power is in the blood of the lamb, the slaughtering of the lamb.
Right. Power is in his death.
It's in his death.
So earlier, his power, if you recall, in the Old Testament, or even in the earlier parts of this Revelation, were in the spoken word. That was where the earlier power was found.
Right.
There's not other weapons.
Right.
There's not military and guns and whatever. Death and the spoken word are the weapons of God.
That goes against everything we know in our life.
Death and the spoken word. So now I want you to relate this back. What would this mean when you hear that the power is found in death and the spoken word? So what would this mean then to the churches of Asia Minor that we just heard in the Roman Empire, that we just heard written to in the Roman Empire? What would that mean to them to see this image? Your power is found in death and the spoken word.
I mean, it would be, I'm just trying to imagine, like, all you've known is you've grown up in this culture steeped with Caesar is the one at the top, military power, Pax Romana, peace, right? Like power keeps the peace. your military might keeps the peace, and here, and like that's where you find life is in that. But this church is now it's got to be for someone growing up in that culture of the Roman Empire. It's got to be flipped upside down.
Flipped upside down. So
Almost disorienting.
yes. So all of a sudden you're reading this or you're hearing this revelation, and it's like, okay, I thought I was on the way out. I thought we were going to be extinguished. I thought that my life was over. I'm discouraged. I mean, we have either Nero or Domitian in power, and either one is a madman. And all of a sudden it flips it and said, actually, you're more powerful
Right.
than the Roman Empire.
Right. It's counterintuitive. It's so counterintuitive.
Right. So knowing that,
somehow my death, well, yeah, it's almost like I'm going to die and with nothing. But yeah, it's almost like your death is actually going to have purpose.
Right. In this case, it's Christ's death, but
Right.
it's also saying weakness and suffering is the power.
Right.
It's a reversal of everything. So
like it's Christ's death, but if we are to imitate that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So this would be so shocking and encouraging to these tiny churches that when we jump as Christians and only see the risen Jesus Christ in glory, and we see his death as a thing of the past, then we miss the central theme of power here, because power is found in the death,
right,
in the slaughter. So on this throne, you've now got the one who's seated on the throne that's all kinds of light and joy, which is God, obviously.
Right.
And the throne is now shared with the slaughtered lamb, who is the Lion of Judah.
Right.
It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So last few minutes, because of that, now we go back to the interpretation of Revelation, right?
Yeah.
So this is the central interpretation, what we build the rest of Revelation on, which we're going to talk about next week. But when you start to then go into all these war scenes, which we're going to get to, it cannot mean what it's been interpreted as.
Right.
Because the weapons and the power are death and the spoken word.
Yep.
It's not militaristic. So let's keep that in mind.
Right. And I'm even thinking because I'm thinking, well, you can slay people with your spoken word, like how you, it's like not only spoken word, but how you're speaking, like what word are you speaking to them? Because, sticks and stones may break my bones, all that stuff, but words do hurt, but
Totally.
Yeah. So I don't know. I was just thinking of that as a preemptive thought as we move forward.
Because next week, we're starting to get into the judgments, but we have to keep in mind 4 and 5. Look, the Lion of Judah, but he actually saw the Lamb. The power is found in death in the spoken word.
Right. It's it's what Jesus was almost, in essence, he was trying to tell his disciples when they were thinking like, oh, this new Messiah, this new kingdom is coming. And Jesus is like, yes, but it's not the kingdom that you think it's going to be.
Which is why there is nothing new in the book of Revelation.
Totally.
Okay.
All right.
That's it for today.
That's it? We're
done?
Yeah,
we can't believe we made it.
You're going to leave me like, you're going to leave our hearers like that? All right.
I am.
Well, thank you for joining us this week. Remember, if you are listening on your whatever your podcast platform is, if you want to check us out on YouTube, you can go to YouTube and check out Point Loma Church Online. And while you're there, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're on YouTube and you think, oh, I want to listen to this while I'm moving around, you can go to your whatever your podcast platform is. We're on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, all those. So you go check it out. Anyway, we're so glad you're here. We'll check it out. We'll see you next week. Right? Yeah, right. See you later.